We're back out here once again at the Big Lake, and today we're talking about why YouTube fishing videos can be misleading, especially for bank anglers. Stick around. And here's this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have your comment featured on the next video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. Now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing, and today we're talking about a topic I feel doesn't get the attention it deserves. And that is why bank angling really isn't covered very well in YouTube videos. We'll see our favorite YouTubers out on their boat over deep water using their favorite techniques for drop shotting or deep diving cranks or jigging spoons or whatever. And those don't really apply for bank angling. They'll talk about how they're using their electronics, their forward-facing sonar, their side imaging, their down imaging to locate bass, to learn bass patterns and behavior. And I don't know about you, but I don't know of any bank anglers that have those sorts of electronics. Now, they're great, and they really do help an angler from the boat catch more fish. And they can, when used properly as a tool, teach you all about bass angling and the sport of bass fishing. You can learn so much about bass behavior and patterns if you know how to correctly read your electronics. They're more than just graphs or charts that say, oh, there's the fish, throw your lure right there. They actually do help you quite a bit when it comes to learning bass behavior, because you can see the types of structure they're swimming around, whether they're chasing balls of bait, whether they're suspended or hugging close to the bottom or whatever. You find these different types of behaviors through different conditions and different seasons of the year, and they are great. Unfortunately, though, they don't really apply to bank angling. Now, as you know, many of you who watch this channel quite regularly, I actually try to focus a little bit more on bank angling. Now, granted, there are some fishing things that I prefer to do from my bass buggy, such as flipping a jig. Again, that's one of the things that you really can't do from the bank. But for the most part, returning viewers, regular viewers to this channel, know I like to focus on bank angling. And the reason why I do that is because the techniques that I demonstrate can be done either from the bank or from the boat. Let's take a drop shot, for example. If you're doing it from a boat, you're going to be doing it completely differently from how you're doing it from the bank. And there's several reasons for that. First and foremost, when you're doing it from a boat, well, you're going to be in deeper water. Your line is going to be at a much steeper angle, which means you don't need as much leader length between your hook and your weight. And the type of weight you're using can also change. You can use more of a tube style whenever you're fishing from the boat. However, if you're fishing from the bank, your line is going to be much more horizontal. That means even with the same length leader, your bait is going to be closer to the bottom. And that will totally change whether you get bites or whether you don't get bites. It changes how you can use that presentation, how you can work that presentation as you bring it back to you, whether you're coming through vegetation, whether you're coming up a steep bank, or whatever. Whenever you're fishing from the bank, you're almost always going to be fishing uphill. There's going to be a few times where there may be a hump between where you casted and where you are, and you can drag it up and over. That's a rare occasion. Most of the time, you're going to be fishing uphill. That's going to change how you work your presentations. It's also going to change what you can throw. As we discussed in the last video, you're not really going to be throwing a square bill from the bank. It's just not practical, as well as a deep diver. As a matter of fact, most billed crankbaits don't work great from the bank. And that's just the nature of it. That's just how things work. So whenever you are watching your favorite YouTuber, and these guys, when they're fishing, there's no malicious intent, they're not trying to be mean. This is just how they fish. But they often forget that 90% of their viewers don't have a boat. The vast majority of bass anglers fish from the bank. So whenever you're watching these guys, you have to take what they say with a grain of salt. If you're fishing from a boat and you have access to the type of waters that they have in those types of conditions, then it works. I mean, even a lot of times you can adapt what you have for changing conditions, changing environments, but you're still fishing it from a boat. whenever you're fishing something like a deep diving creek, for example. It doesn't matter if you're fishing a highland reservoir or a lowland reservoir, if you're out over deep water, or if you can find channel swings or ditches or drains or things of that nature where you have the access and the depth to fish that sort of bait. So that transfers from lake to lake to lake. However, it does not transfer from boat to bank. And that's what I try to do. So whenever you're watching these videos, remember, the advice is not bad. The techniques are not bad, but you have to remember going from the boat to the bank is a completely different animal. You've got to remember when you're doing those things, such as fishing a lipless crankbait. Remember, when you're fishing a lipless crankbait from the boat, you're over a lot deeper water. Chances are you're not going to be fishing nearly as much vegetation as you would, especially for a lake like this that's just choked with vegetation. We've said that 1,000 times and probably continue to say it 1,000 more. But you take a lipless crankbait, you're going to be fishing it differently from how you would from the bank. Here's an example I did just a little while ago to illustrate the differences between fishing a crankbait from the boat and fishing a crankbait from the bank.
All right, we're going to get a little crazy, a little wild with it, because I want to throw a red lipless. I want to see what that gets us. As soon as I can get it untangled off the stuff. There we are. I'm going to throw this red lipless. May not be time yet, but I want to still see. You know? I just want to see what the old lipless bite is going to be like. Now, again, when you're fishing this from the bank, you're going to have to fish it differently. I'm keeping my rod tip a lot higher, and I'm still probably going to get all gunky before I get to the bank. But for the main part, where I'm coming through the strike zone, which is going to be out in the middle of the channel there, yeah, see right there, I got a whole bunch of gunk on it. A whole bunch of gunk. And you're not ripping that stuff off. Boy, there's minnows everywhere. You are not ripping that off. I will be happy when they invent a weedless crankbait that actually works. You know, some places fishing the lipless is just not the best idea, and this is one of them. But if you do it, if you are mindful about how you do it, like we were talking about, right? Fishing a lipless from the boat is completely different from fishing a lipless from the bank. Fishing any type of crankbait is way different from the boat. And you have to keep that in mind when you're fishing. I'm fishing from the bank right now, so I'm making sure my rod tip is up, and that's going to help. Yeah, I got one. Ooh, here I was talking, and come here, little. And this little guy popped out. I actually thought I was snagged. There we are. I don't know, little dink, half pound, 3/4 pounder, and we caught it on the red lipless, and that's exactly what I was talking about. Fishing it differently. There you go, little buddy. And there he goes.
So as you can see, the retrieve is going to be different. How you present that bait, how you work that bait is going to be different. Keeping your rod tip up as opposed to being able to let your rod tip go down. You can work that bait in deeper water. But from the bank, unless you want to get all gummed up on every single cast, you got to keep that rod up and you have to feel for that vegetation. So that's an example of the little nuances between working a bait from the boat and working a bait from the bank. That's a lot of B's. Bait, bank, boat. Anyway, that's just something that you need to be mindful of. It will definitely increase your hookup ratio and your bite ratio if you can learn to translate what works on the boat to what works from the bank. Even something as innocuous as a spinnerbait. You fish that differently from the boat and from the bank. From the boat, you can let it sink very deep and drag it along the bottom nice and slow. From the bank, well, you can try doing that for a ways, but again, you've got to bring it through the vegetation on the way back. Everything has to deal with vegetation when you're fishing from the bank sooner or later. Another major difference is the way you can access the water. In a boat, you have access to virtually everything. There's going to be very few times when you don't have access to the water, and that generally has to do with water depth. When it comes to fishing from the bank, Well, you can only put your line in places you can put your line in. And I know that might sound strange and not very explanatory, but bank anglers know what I mean. Whether there's a brush pile that's in the way, whether there's a building or a fence that's in the way, or whatever. Maybe the water's really choice, but you can only get to it at the very edge because there's a row of bushes, or you just can't access it. So you've got to make your casts count. Every bank angler knows the struggle just to be able to access the water, to be able to put your baits in to make that presentation. And those are the sorts of things you need to keep in mind whenever you're watching these tips from the YouTube videos. Again, the great tips, these guys know what they're talking about. There is no malintent, I'm absolutely sure of it, but they often forget 90% or more of the people watching their videos, they don't have a boat and they're not able to fish that way. So we're watching it more as entertainment than it is informational. And I kind of want to change that around a little bit. That's why here at this channel, we want to focus on the bank a little bit more. Now, the things that I do say and the tips that I am giving, they translate fine to the boat. So going from the bank to the boat is a lot easier than going from the boat to the bank. And those are the things that we just need to keep in mind. So there you have it. The next time you're watching your favorite YouTuber and they're out on their boat fishing in deep water, you have to remember how to be able to translate that to your situation. If you're a bank angler, learn to adapt it. Remember, even the same bait is fished differently from the boat and from the bank. If you can remember that, and if you can learn how to adapt with it, well, your bite ratio is going to go way up. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.